The blood on Owen Shepherd's hands told him it was time to leave another town behind, though this time the blood belonged to a man who had drawn first and deserved what he got. He stood in the dusty street of Rawlins, Wyoming, watching the undertaker drag the body away while the marshal gave him a hard look that said he should be moving along soon, real soon. It was 1882, and Owen had been drifting from one cattle town to another for 8 years now, ever since his parents died of cholera and left him with nothing but a horse, a gun, and the clothes on his back. He was 26 years old and felt twice that age, worn down by the endless moving, the fights, the women whose names he forgot before he left town, the jobs that paid just enough to get him to the next place where he would do it all over again. He walked into the saloon to wash the dust from his throat, pushing through the swinging doors with shoulders that had grown broad from years of ranch work and trail riding. The bartender poured him whiskey without asking, and Owen downed it in one gulp, feeling the burn all the way to his stomach. The place was half empty in the afternoon heat, just a few ranch hands playing cards in the corner and an old-timer nursing a beer at the end of the bar. "That was some shooting," the bartender said, wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. "Billy Morrison was fast, but you were faster." "He should have kept his mouth shut about my mother," Owen said quietly, his voice carrying the flat tone of a man who had had this conversation too many times before. "A man says things like that. He should expect consequences." "Fair enough." "You planning on staying around?" Owen shrugged. "Depends. Their work in this town. The Watson Ranch is always looking for hands. They got a big spread about 5 miles north of here. Pay is decent and they feed you proper." The bartender leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Though I should warn you, the old man Watson died about 6 months back. His daughter runs the place now, and she does not take kindly to drifters or troublemakers." "I am not looking for trouble," Owen said, though even as he said it, he knew trouble had a way of finding him regardless of what he was looking for. "Just honest work and a place to rest my head for a while." The bartender gave him a skeptical look, but poured him another whiskey anyway. Owen paid for both drinks and walked back out into the harsh afternoon sun, squinting against the glare. His horse, a bay gelding named Red, was tied up outside, swishing his tail against the flies. Owen patted the horse's neck and swung into the saddle, pointing Red north toward the Watson Ranch. The ride took him through rolling grassland, dotted with cattle bearing the Watson brand, a simple W inside a circle. The ranch itself came into view as the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, a collection of buildings clustered around a 2-story house that looked like it had been built to last. There were corrals full of horses, a big barn painted red, and several outbuildings that suggested this was a prosperous operation. Owen rode up to the main house and dismounted, tying Red to the hitching post. Before he could knock on the door, a woman came around the corner of the house carrying a bucket of water. She stopped when she saw him, setting the bucket down and pushing a strand of dark hair out of her face with the back of her hand. She was not what Owen had expected. The bartender had said Watson's daughter ran the ranch, but Owen had pictured someone older, harder, more worn down by the work. This woman could not have been more than 23 or 24, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid and green eyes that assessed him with the kind of careful scrutiny usually reserved for horses at auction. She wore a simple cotton dress covered by a work apron, and her hands showed the calluses of someone who did not shy away from labor. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice pleasant enough but guarded. "I am looking for work," Owen said, pulling off his hat. "I am good with horses and cattle, can fix fences, break horses, whatever needs doing." The bartender in town said you might be hiring. Did he now?" She picked up the bucket again, and Owen noticed how she kept her distance, smart enough not to get too close to a stranger who wore his gun tied down like he knew how to use it. "What is your name?" "Owen Shepherd, madam. Miss Emma Watson," she said. "And I heard about what happened in town this afternoon. Billy Morrison might have been a fool and a drunk, but he is still dead, and you are the one who killed him." Owen felt something in his chest tighten. Of course, she had already heard. Bad news traveled faster than good in small towns. He drew first. "Ask anyone who was there." "I am sure he did. Billy was always looking for a fight." Emma set the bucket down again and crossed her arms. "But that does not change the fact that you are a gunfighter, Mr. Shepherd, and gunfighters bring trouble. I have worked too hard to keep this ranch running smoothly to have that kind of trouble on my land." "I am not a gunfighter," Owen said, though the words tasted like a lie even as he spoke them. "I am a ranch hand who knows how to defend himself. There is a difference." Emma studied him for a long moment, and Owen found himself unable to look away from those green eyes. There was intelligence there and strength, and something else he could not quite name. Sadness, maybe, or loneliness. The kind that came from shouldering burdens that were too heavy for one person to carry alone. "I lost 3 men last month," she finally said. "They went to work for the railroad because the pay was better. I have got 100 head that need moving to summer pasture, fences that need mending, and horses that need breaking. I cannot afford to be particular right now." She pointed toward the bunkhouse. $30 a month plus room and board. "You cause trouble, you fight with my other hands. You so much as look at me the wrong way and you are gone. Understood?" "Yes, madam, Miss Watson, I understand." "Good. Bunkhouse is over there. Supper is at 6. Do not be late." She picked up her bucket and walked toward the house, leaving Owen standing there feeling like he had just been through a harder test than any gunfight. He led Red to the barn and unsaddled him, rubbing the horse down and making sure he had fresh water and feed before he headed to the bunkhouse. The building was simple but clean, with a dozen bunks lining the walls and a pot-bellied stove in the center. Only 3 of the bunks looked occupied, which confirmed what Emma had said about being short-handed. Owen chose a bunk near the door and stowed his gear, then splashed water on his face from the basin outside. The other hands came in as the sun was setting, 3 weathered men who introduced themselves as Frank, Martinez, and Old Tom. They were friendly enough once they sized him up, and Frank even offered him a cigarette, which Owen declined. "So you are the one who shot Billy Morrison," Martinez said, not unkindly. "That must make you pretty fast." "Fast enough," Owen said, not wanting to talk about it. Old Tom laughed, a wheezing sound that turned into a cough. Billy was a loudmouth and a bully. Someone was going to kill him sooner or later. Better you than someone who might feel bad about it. They walked to the main house for supper, and Owen found himself in a dining room that was surprisingly comfortable, with a long table that could seat a dozen people and walls decorated with photographs of the Watson family. Emma served the meal herself, a hearty stew with fresh bread and coffee that was actually good, not the bitter mud that passed for coffee in most bunkhouses. "Miss Emma does her own cooking," Frank explained when he saw Owen's surprise. "She had a housekeeper for a while, but the woman quit last year. Said it was too lonely out here." Emma sat at the head of the table, eating in silence while the men talked about the work that needed doing. Owen found his eyes drawn to her again and again, studying the way she listened carefully to everything that was said, the way she made notes on a piece of paper beside her plate, the way she brushed that same strand of hair out of her face with an unconscious gesture that he was already finding familiar. After supper, the men went back to the bunkhouse to play cards and smoke, but Owen walked outside instead, needing the fresh air and the quiet. The stars were coming out, more stars than he had seen in months, spreading across the sky like spilled salt. He leaned against the corral fence and rolled a cigarette, letting the peace of the place seep into his bones. Could not sleep. He turned to find Emma standing a few feet away, wrapped in a shawl against the cooling night air. He had not heard her approach, which bothered him. He prided himself on always being aware of his surroundings. "Just enjoying the quiet," he said. "It is a nice place you have got here." "My father built it from nothing," Emma said, coming to stand beside him at the fence. "He came out here in '58 with just a wagon and a dream. He worked himself to death proving that dream could be real." There was bitterness in her voice and grief that was still raw despite the months that had passed. "I am sorry for your loss." "Are you?" She looked at him, and in the moonlight her face was pale and lovely. "You do not seem like the kind of man who stays in one place long enough to lose anything." The words stung because they were true. "No, madam, I guess I am not." "Why is that? Why do you keep moving?" Owen took a drag on his cigarette, considering how much to tell her. "Because every place starts to feel the same after a while. The same fights, the same jobs, the same people with the same stories. Easier to keep moving than to put down roots that will just get torn up again." "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "But it is what I know." Emma was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dark shapes of the cattle in the distance. "I thought about leaving after my father died. I could have sold this place, moved back east where my mother's family is. But this ranch was his whole life. Walking away from it would have felt like saying his life did not matter. I am sure it mattered to him that you stayed. He was already dead when I made the decision." She pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Some days I wonder if I am running this ranch for him or for me. If there is even a difference anymore." Owen did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, and he found himself thinking that this was the first real conversation he had had with anyone in months, maybe years. "I should get to bed," Emma finally said. "We are moving cattle tomorrow, and it will be a long day. I expect you to pull your weight, Mr. Shepherd." "I will, Miss Watson. You can count on that." She nodded and walked back toward the house, and Owen watched her go, feeling something shift inside his chest. He told himself it was just appreciation for a good meal and a decent place to sleep, nothing more. But as he finished his cigarette and headed back to the bunkhouse, he knew he was lying to himself. The next morning came early, with old Tom shaking him awake before dawn. Owen dressed quickly and followed the other men to the barn, where Emma was already saddling her horse, a pretty paint mare that danced sideways when Owen got too close. "Rosie does not like strangers," Emma said, patting the mare's neck. "She will get used to you eventually." They spent the morning moving cattle to higher pasture, hard work that involved a lot of riding and shouting and cursing at stubborn cows that did not want to go where they were supposed to. Owen found himself working alongside Emma, and he was impressed by how well she handled herself. She sat her horse like she had been born in the saddle, and she could rope a stray calf as well as any man he had ever seen. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat the sandwiches Emma had packed. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, and Owen accepted the canteen she passed him, drinking deeply before handing it back. "You are good with cattle," Emma said, unwrapping her sandwich. "Better than some of the men I have had working here." "I have been doing this since I was a kid," Owen said. "My father had a small spread down in Colorado before he died, nothing like this but enough to teach me the work. What happened to it after he passed? Bank took it. He owed more than it was worth." Owen bit into his sandwich, not wanting to talk about those dark days. That was a long time ago. How long have you been drifting? 8 years, give or take. Emma looked at him with something like pity in her eyes, and Owen hated it. He did not want her pity. He did not want anyone's pity. That is a long time to be alone, she said softly. I manage. They finished eating in silence, and then it was back to work. By the time they got the cattle settled in the new pasture and rode back to the ranch, the sun was setting and Owen was bone tired. But it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from honest work and a job well done. Over the next few weeks, Owen settled into the rhythm of ranch life. He woke before dawn, worked until his muscles ached, ate Emma's good cooking, and fell into his bunk each night so exhausted that he did not even dream. It should have been just another job, another temporary stop on his endless journey, but something was different this time. Emma was different. He found himself looking for excuses to work near her, to hear her voice, to see the way she smiled when one of the horses did something clever. She was not like the saloon girls he had known in a dozen different towns, all paint and perfume and empty promises. Emma was real solid, someone who knew what she wanted and was not afraid to work for it. She was also completely off limits. She was his boss, the woman who paid his wages and put food on his table. Getting involved with her would be the fastest way to lose the best job he had had in years. And yet he could not stop thinking about her. One evening, about a month after he had arrived, Owen was in the barn mending a broken bridle when Emma came in carrying a lantern. The sun had just set, and the barn was full of shadows and the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. I thought you might need some light, she said, hanging the lantern on a hook near his workbench. Thank you. He kept his eyes on his work, trying to ignore the way his heart had started beating faster. Emma leaned against the workbench, watching him work. You are good with leather. Did you learn that from your father, too? No, I picked that up along the way. Turns out if you can fix tack, you can always find work. Is that important to you, always being able to move on? Owen set down the bridle and finally looked at her. It used to be. And now? Now I am not so sure. The words came out before he could stop them, and he saw something flicker in Emma's eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear, possibly both. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You know why? The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Owen knew he should back away, make a joke, do anything to diffuse the tension. Instead, he took a step closer. Owen, Emma said, and his name on her lips was both a warning and a question. Emma. He reached out and tucked that wayward strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Her skin was soft and warm, and when she did not pull away, he let his hand cup her face. This is a bad idea, she said, but she was leaning into his touch. Probably the worst I have ever had. He bent his head slowly, giving her time to stop him, but she did not. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, almost shy, and then deeper as 8 years of loneliness and longing poured out of Owen all at once. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Emma's eyes were wide, her lips slightly swollen, and Owen thought she had never looked more beautiful. I should not have done that, Owen said, though he did not mean it. No, you should not have. Emma touched her fingers to her lips like she was trying to memorize the feeling. But I am glad you did. What do we do now? I do not know, she laughed, a shaky sound. I have never done this before, I have never wanted to, neither have I, not like this. They stood there in the lamplight, looking at each other, and Owen felt something fundamental shift inside him. For 8 years, he had been running from everything, commitment and connection and the risk of loss. But standing here with Emma, he realized that running was just another kind of prison. I should go, Emma said, but she did not move, probably. People will talk if they see us together. Let them talk. Emma smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "You say that now, but you do not know how vicious small-town gossip can be. I have been through worse than gossip." "Have you?" She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Have you ever stayed in one place long enough to care what people think?" "No," Owen admitted, "but I am starting to think I would like to try." The summer passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Owen and Emma were careful to keep their growing relationship private, meeting in the barn after everyone else had gone to bed, taking rides out to check the fences that always seemed to last a little longer than necessary. The other hands knew something was going on, but they were discreet about it. Frank even started making excuses for why Owen should help Miss Emma with this or that task, always with a knowing wink that made Owen want to punch him and thank him at the same time. Owen had never felt this way before. Every woman he had known in the past had been temporary, a brief distraction from the loneliness of the road. But Emma was different. She was smart and strong and funny, with a sharp wit that kept him on his toes and a kindness that made him want to be a better man. She told him about growing up on the ranch, about her mother who had died when Emma was 12, about her father who had loved the land more than anything except his daughter. She told him about the hard years after the war, when cattle prices dropped and drought threatened to ruin them, about the slow recovery that had taken years of backbreaking work. In turn, Owen told her things he had never told anyone. About his childhood in Colorado, about watching his parents die and being unable to help them, about the 8 years of drifting that had left him feeling empty and purposeless. He told her about the fights he had been in, the men he had killed in self-defense, the darkness that sometimes threatened to swallow him whole. "You are not a bad man," Emma said one night as they sat together in the hayloft, her head resting on his shoulder. "You have done things you are not proud of, but that does not make you bad." "How do you know?" "Because a bad man would not feel guilty about it. A bad man would not want to be better." She lifted her head to look at him. "You are not running from the law, Owen. You are running from yourself." "Maybe I was," he said, pulling her closer, "but I am not running anymore." "What changed?" Owen kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "You did." As autumn approached, bringing cooler nights and the knowledge that Roundup was coming, Owen began to think about the future in ways he never had before. He thought about staying on at the ranch, about putting down real roots for the first time in his adult life. He thought about asking Emma to marry him, though the idea terrified him almost as much as it thrilled him. One afternoon in late September, Owen was working in the corral breaking a young stallion when a rider came up the road to the ranch. Owen recognized him as the marshal from town, and his stomach dropped. The marshal was a fair man who had given Owen the benefit of the doubt after the shooting, but Owen knew that Billy Morrison had family, and family had a way of holding grudges. Emma came out of the house when she saw the marshal, wiping her hands on her apron. Owen finished securing the stallion and walked over to join them, his hand instinctively checking that his gun was loose in its holster. "Marshal," Emma said, "what brings you out here, Miss Watson?" "Shepherd." The marshal touched his hat brim. "I am afraid I have got some bad news. Billy Morrison's brother rode into town this morning, says he is looking for the man who killed Billy." "I killed him in self-defense," Owen said evenly. "You were there. You saw what happened." "I know that, and you know that, but Jack Morrison does not care about the facts. He has been drinking since he got to town, telling anyone who will listen that he is going to put you in the ground." The marshal looked at Owen with something like regret. "I cannot arrest a man for making threats, but I can warn you. Jack is dangerous. He has killed 3 men that I know of and probably more that I do not." Owen felt Emma's hand on his arm, gripping tight. "What are you saying, Marshal? That Owen should leave town?" I am saying he should be careful. Maybe lay low for a while until Jack moves on, or I can convince him to let it go. This is my home now, Owen said, surprised by how true the words felt. I am not running from some drunk with a grudge. Then you better be ready for a fight. The marshal tipped his hat again. I will do what I can to keep the peace, but if Jack calls you out, there is not much I can do to stop it. After the marshal left, Emma turned to Owen with fear in her eyes. You have to leave, just for a little while until this blows over. I am not leaving you. Owen, please, I cannot lose you. Not now, not when I have just found you. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. You are not going to lose me. I have spent 8 years running, Emma. I am done with that. If Jack Morrison wants a fight, he will get one, but I am not leaving. You could die. I could die falling off a horse tomorrow. I could die from a snake bite or pneumonia or 100 other things. He tilted her face up so she was looking at him. But I am not going to die running away from the first real thing I have ever had in my life. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You are a fool, Owen Shepherd. I know, but I am your fool if you will have me. Of course I will have you. She kissed him, hard and desperate, like she was trying to memorize the taste of him. I love you. I should have said it before, but I was scared. I love you too. The words felt strange on his tongue, but good. Right. I have loved you since that first night when you stood in the moonlight and told me about your father. They held each other for a long moment, and then Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. If you are staying, then we need a plan. Jack Morrison is not going to just give up and leave. No, he is not. Owen thought for a moment, but maybe we can end this without anyone dying. How, I do not know yet, but I am going to figure it out. That evening, Owen rode into town alone despite Emma's protests. He left his gun behind, wearing only his knife, and he went straight to the saloon where Jack Morrison was reportedly staying. The place was crowded for a weeknight, full of miners and ranch hands and drifters, all of them drinking and gambling and trying to forget their troubles for a few hours. Jack Morrison was easy to spot. He looked like his brother, with the same weak chin and mean eyes, but he was bigger and harder, with the kind of stillness that marked a truly dangerous man. He was sitting at a table in the back, flanked by 2 men who had to be hired guns judging by the way they wore their weapons. Owen walked straight to the table, ignoring the way the conversation in the saloon died down as people realized what was happening. He stopped a respectful distance away and met Jack's eyes. I am Owen Shepherd, he said. I hear you are looking for me. Jack leaned back in his chair, studying Owen with cold calculation. You have got some stones coming here unarmed. I am not here to fight. I am here to talk. Nothing to talk about. You killed my brother. That means you die. It is simple. Your brother drew on me first. Ask anyone who was there. Ask the marshal. I tried to walk away, but Billy would not let it go. Billy was a hothead, but he was my blood. That means something to me. Jack took a drink from his glass, never taking his eyes off Owen. So here is how this is going to work. Tomorrow at noon, you and me are going to settle this in the street. You can die standing or you can die running, but either way, you are going to die. Owen felt the familiar cold certainty settle over him, the same feeling he got every time someone pushed him to the edge. He had tried to do this the right way, but Jack Morrison was not interested in the right way. He was interested in revenge, and nothing Owen said was going to change that. All right, Owen said quietly. Tomorrow at noon, but just you and me. No hired guns, no backup. We settle this clean. Fair enough. Jack smiled, showing yellow teeth. I will see you tomorrow, Shepherd. Do not be late. Owen walked out of the saloon, feeling the weight of every eye in the place on his back. He climbed onto Red and rode slowly out of town, his mind already working through what was going to happen tomorrow. He had been in gunfights before, more than he wanted to count, but this felt different. This time he had something to lose. Emma was waiting for him when he got back to the ranch, pacing back and forth in front of the barn. She ran to him as soon as she saw him, and he caught her in his arms. "What happened? You were gone so long. I thought something terrible had happened." "I talked to Jack Morrison." Owen held her close, feeling her heart racing against his chest. "He wants to settle this tomorrow at noon in town." "No," Emma pulled back, her face pale. "No, you are not doing this. I do not have a choice. If I run, he will just follow. And if I stay here, he will come to the ranch and innocent people could get hurt. This is the only way to end it. You could get killed. I could. But I am faster than he is, Emma. I can feel it. I know it sounds crazy, but I know these things. I have been doing this too long not to know." Emma pressed her face against his chest, her shoulders shaking. "I just found you. I cannot lose you now. You are not going to lose me." He stroked her hair, wishing he could promise her that everything would be all right, but knowing he could not. "I am going to come back to you, I swear it." They spent that night together in the barn, wrapped in blankets in the hayloft, holding each other and talking in whispers about the future they wanted to build. Emma told him about her dreams for the ranch, about expanding the herd and maybe building a bigger house. Owen told her about the life he wanted with her, about children and growing old together, about finally having a place to call home. "When you come back," Emma said, her voice fierce in the darkness, "I want you to stay, not as a ranch hand but as my husband. I want you to marry me, Owen Shepherd." Owen laughed, surprised. "I thought the man was supposed to ask. You were taking too long." She kissed him, deep and sweet. "So what do you say?" "I say yes. 1,000 times yes." They made love as the stars wheeled overhead, gentle and tender and desperate all at once, and when the dawn came, Owen felt like he was leaving a piece of his soul behind in that hayloft. He rode into town just before noon, his gun belt strapped on and his mind clear and calm. Emma had wanted to come with him, but he had refused. This was his fight, his past catching up with him one last time, and he needed to face it alone. The street was empty when he arrived, which meant the whole town knew what was about to happen. People were watching from windows and doorways, and the marshal was standing in front of his office with his arms crossed, looking resigned to what was coming. Jack Morrison was already waiting in the middle of the street, standing loose and ready with the sun at his back. It was a deliberate choice, Owen knew, meant to put him at a disadvantage. But Owen had fought in worse conditions, and he was not worried about the sun. "Thought maybe you would not show," Jack called out as Owen dismounted and tied Red to a hitching post. "I told you I would be here." Owen walked out into the street, stopping about 20 paces from Jack, close enough to make the shot easy, far enough to give them both time to draw. "Any last words?" Jack asked. "Yeah. Your brother was a bully and a drunk, and he got what he deserved, but you do not have to die for his mistakes. Walk away, Morrison. Just walk away and let this be done." "Not a chance." Jack's hand hovered over his gun. "I am going to enjoy watching you die." "Then I guess we are doing this." The moment stretched out, taut as a wire, and Owen felt time slow down the way it always did in these situations. He could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of his gun, could see the slight tensing of Jack's shoulders that told him the man was about to draw. They moved at the same time, both of them fast, but Owen was faster. His gun cleared leather and fired in one smooth motion, the shot echoing down the street like thunder. Jack's gun was only halfway up when the bullet took him in the chest, spinning him around and dropping him to the ground. Owen walked forward slowly, his gun still trained on Jack in case the man had any fight left in him. But Jack was done, blood spreading across his shirt, his breathing shallow and ragged. His eyes found Owen's, filled with surprise and anger and fear. "I am sorry," Owen said, and he meant it. I wish it did not have to be this way." Jack tried to say something, but blood came up instead of words, and then his eyes went glassy and still. Owen stood over the body for a moment, feeling the familiar emptiness that always followed these things, and then he holstered his gun and turned to the marshal. "It was a fair fight," the marshal said. "I will file the report that way. Thank you." Owen looked around at the people emerging from their hiding places, their faces showing a mixture of awe and fear. This was what he had been running from all these years, this moment when people stopped seeing him as a man and started seeing him as a killer. But then he thought of Emma waiting for him at the ranch, and he realized it did not matter what these people thought. The only opinion that mattered was hers, and she had already chosen him. He rode back to the ranch at a gallop, needing to see her, to hold her, to prove to himself that he had survived and that the future was still real. Emma was standing in front of the house when he arrived, and she ran to him as he dismounted, throwing herself into his arms with such force that he almost fell over. "You are alive," she said, her voice breaking. "You are alive. I told you I would come back." He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the tension drain out of his body. "I told you." They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, and Owen felt something inside him finally settle. The restlessness that had driven him for so long was gone, replaced by a bone-deep certainty that this was where he was supposed to be. "I want to marry you as soon as possible," Emma said, pulling back to look at him. "I do not want to wait. Neither do I." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Rawlins, with Frank and Martinez and old Tom standing as witnesses, and half the town in attendance. Emma wore her mother's wedding dress, which had been carefully preserved in a trunk, and Owen wore a new suit that Emma had bought for him in town. He felt uncomfortable in the fancy clothes, but the look on Emma's face when she saw him made it worth it. The preacher was a young man fresh from seminary, earnest and nervous, and he stumbled over the words a few times. But when he got to the part about speaking now or forever holding your peace, the church was silent except for the sound of people breathing. And when he pronounced them man and wife, the congregation erupted in applause. Owen kissed his bride, and it felt like coming home. They had a reception at the ranch, with Emma's friends bringing food and the hands setting up tables in the yard. There was music and dancing and more food than Owen had seen in years, and he spent the evening in a daze of happiness, unable to believe that this was his life now. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left, and the hands had discreetly disappeared to the bunkhouse, Owen and Emma stood together in front of the house, looking up at the stars. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and discover this was all a dream," Owen said, his arm around Emma's waist. "If it is a dream, then we are both having it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Owen, can I ask you something? Anything? What made you stay, really? I know you said it was me, but you have been running for so long. What made you finally stop?" Owen thought about all the answers he could give, all the poetic things he could say, but Emma deserved the truth, plain and simple. "You did," he said. "You made me believe that I could be more than just a drifter and a gunfighter. You made me believe that I deserved a home and a family and all the things I had given up on. You changed everything, Emma. You changed me." She turned in his arms to face him, her eyes shining with tears. "I am glad. Because I cannot imagine my life without you now. You will never have to." They went inside then, to the bedroom that was now theirs together, and Owen closed the door on his old life forever. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from 100 head of cattle to 300, then 500. They hired more hands, built a new barn, and added onto the house. Owen proved to have a head for business that surprised both of them. And Emma's skill with horses became so well known that people from 3 counties over came to buy Watson's stock. They had their first child in the spring of 1884, a boy they named Thomas after Emma's father. Owen held his son for the first time with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the tiny, perfect life he and Emma had created. He looked down at Thomas's little red face and made a silent promise that he would be a better father than his own had been able to be, that he would give this child all the stability and love that Owen himself had lacked. Emma recovered quickly from the birth, her strength returning within weeks, though Owen insisted on doing more than his share of the work around the house. He learned to change diapers and soothe a crying baby in the middle of the night, skills he had never imagined needing. But he found he loved it, loved the simple domesticity of family life after so many years of wandering. Thomas was followed by a daughter named Rose in 1886, and then another son, James, in 1888. The house rang with children's laughter, and Owen sometimes had to stop what he was doing just to take it all in, to remind himself that this was real and permanent and his. Frank retired in 1889, too old to handle the physical demands of ranch work, but Owen kept him on as a kind of foreman, managing the younger hands and teaching them the ropes. Martinez married a widow from town and moved into a small house on the edge of the Watson property. And old Tom finally died peacefully in his sleep in 1890, leaving behind a reputation as the best storyteller in the county. Through it all, Owen and Emma's love deepened and matured, growing from the passionate urgency of those early days into something richer and more solid. They still had their moments of friction, arguments about money or the children or how to run the ranch, but they always worked through them. Owen had learned that staying in one place and building a life with someone meant dealing with problems instead of running from them. And while it was not always easy, it was always worth it. One evening in the fall of 1892, 10 years after Owen had first ridden up to the ranch looking for work, he and Emma sat on the porch swing watching the sun set over the land they had built together. Thomas was 11 now, already showing signs of the man he would become, tall and serious like his father. Rose was 6, wild and fearless, always coming home with scraped knees and stories of adventure. James was 4, shy and gentle, content to spend hours watching the horses in the corral. "Do you ever think about your old life?" Emma asked, her head resting on Owen's shoulder. "The drifting and the wandering, sometimes," Owen admitted, "but not the way I used to. Now when I think about those years, they feel like they happened to someone else. Like I was sleepwalking through my life until I found you. I feel the same way, like my real life did not start until you came along." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together the way she had that first night in the barn. "Do you remember when you told me you were done running?" "Of course. That was the night you asked me to marry you," Emma laughed. "I was so scared you would say no, or worse, that you would say yes and then change your mind and leave. I could never leave you, you know that. I know it now, but back then I was terrified." "You had spent 8 years running, Owen. 8 years of never staying anywhere longer than a few months. What made you so sure you could stop? What really changed?" Owen was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to put it into words. The sun was almost down now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool with the promise of autumn. From inside the house, he could hear the children playing, their voices high and happy. "You did," he said finally. "You changed everything. Before I met you, I thought I was running towards something, looking for a place where I belonged. But I was really just running away from myself, from the pain of losing my parents and my home. I thought if I kept moving, I could outrun the hurt. He paused, making sure she was really listening. "But then I met you, and you made me want to stop. You made me realize that belonging is not about finding the perfect place. It is about finding the person who makes anywhere feel like home." Emma's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. "You always know exactly what to say." "Only to you." He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then her lips. "Only ever to you." They sat on the porch until the stars came out, talking about their plans for the future. They wanted to send Thomas to school back east eventually, to give him opportunities they had never had. They wanted to expand the ranch even more, maybe get into horse breeding in a bigger way. They wanted to grow old together, to watch their children have children of their own, to build a legacy that would last long after they were gone. And as Owen sat there with Emma in his arms and his children safe inside the house and the land stretching out around them in every direction, he realized that he had everything he had ever wanted and more than he had ever dreamed possible. The past was past, the wandering was done, and the future was bright and full of promise. Years continued to roll by like the seasons, each one bringing new challenges and joys. By 1895, the Watson Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in Wyoming, known for quality cattle and exceptional horses. Owen had fully stepped into his role not just as Emma's husband but as a partner in every sense, his name added to the deed, and the brand officially registered to both of them. Thomas, now 13, was already working alongside his father, learning the business from the ground up. He had Owen's steady hands and Emma's sharp mind, and Owen took pride in teaching his son everything he knew. They spent long hours together in the saddle, checking fences and moving cattle, and Owen found himself sharing stories from his own childhood that he had thought he had forgotten. "Papa," Thomas asked one day as they were riding the northern boundary, "do you ever regret giving up your freedom to settle down?" Owen thought about the question seriously before answering. Thomas was at the age where he was starting to think about his own future, to wonder what kind of man he wanted to become. "Freedom is not the same as being free," Owen finally said. "I thought I was free when I was drifting, but really I was trapped. Trapped by fear and pain and the belief that I did not deserve better. Your mother freed me from that. She gave me something worth staying for, worth fighting for. That is real freedom, son. The freedom to choose your own path, not have it chosen for you by circumstance." Thomas nodded, absorbing this wisdom the way he absorbed everything, quietly and thoughtfully. "I want to be like you when I grow up, Papa. I want to find someone who makes me feel the way Mama makes you feel." Owen reached over and clasped his son's shoulder. "You will, Thomas. When the time is right, you will." Rose was growing into a remarkable young woman, though at 9 years old she was still more interested in riding horses than anything else. She could outride most of the ranch hands, and she had no fear whatsoever, something that gave Emma gray hairs but made Owen secretly proud. She was so much like Emma had been at that age, fierce and independent, determined to prove she was just as capable as any boy. James, now 7, was the poet of the family. He loved books and stories, and he would spend hours in the barn talking to the horses, making up elaborate tales about their adventures. Owen worried sometimes that James was too gentle for the harsh world of ranching, but Emma always reassured him that there was room for all kinds of strength. "Not every man needs to be a fighter," she told Owen one night as they watched James reading by lamplight. "Some men build things with their hands and some build them with their words and their hearts. James will find his way, just like Thomas and Rose will find theirs." In 1897, a drought hit the region hard, testing everything Owen and Emma had built. The grass withered and died, water sources dried up, and cattle prices plummeted as everyone tried to sell at the same time. Other ranchers gave up, selling their land for pennies on the dollar and moving back east. But Owen and Emma held on, using the reserves they had carefully saved and making hard decisions about which cattle to keep and which to sell. It was the hardest year of their marriage, full of stress and fear and long nights spent going over the books trying to make the numbers work. They argued more than they ever had, both of them exhausted and worried and scared of losing everything they had built. One particularly bad night, after a heated argument about whether to sell off part of their breeding stock, Owen stormed out of the house and saddled his horse, intending to ride off his anger the way he used to. He made it about a mile before he realized what he was doing and stopped, sitting on his horse in the darkness and breathing hard. This was it. This was the moment his old self would have kept riding, would have run from the problem instead of facing it. But he was not that man anymore. He had not been that man in 15 years. He turned red around and rode back to the ranch, finding Emma sitting on the porch with her face in her hands. She looked up when she heard him, her face streaked with tears, and Owen felt his heart break. "I am sorry," he said, dismounting and climbing the steps to sit beside her. "I should not have walked out like that. I am sorry, too. I know you are doing everything you can." She leaned against him and he put his arm around her. "I am just so scared, Owen. What if we lose the ranch? What if everything we have worked for just disappears? We are not going to lose it. We are going to get through this, just like we have gotten through everything else." He kissed the top of her head. "Do you remember what I told you that first night when the marshal came to warn me about Jack Morrison? I said I was done running, and I meant it. I am not running from this drought or these problems or anything else. We are in this together, Emma. Always." She turned to look at him, her eyes still wet but hopeful. Together, together. They made it through the drought, though it took most of their savings and a lot of sleepless nights. When the rains finally came in the spring of 1898, Owen and Emma stood in the yard and let the water soak them through, laughing and crying at the same time. The ranch had survived, their family had survived, and they were still standing. The turn of the century brought new opportunities and new challenges. Wyoming was changing, becoming more civilized, with railroads connecting even small towns like Rawlins to the wider world. Thomas was 17 now, talking about going to university to study agriculture and business, and Owen encouraged him despite Emma's reluctance to see her eldest leave. "He needs to see the world," Owen told her. "Not to run from it the way I did, but to learn from it and bring that knowledge back home." Emma knew he was right, but it was still hard to watch Thomas board the train for Colorado in the fall of 1899. They stood on the platform waving until the train was out of sight, and Emma cried all the way home. "He will be back," Owen assured her. "This is his home. He knows that." Rose, at 13, had become a skilled horsewoman, winning competitions at county fairs and earning a reputation as someone who could gentle even the most difficult animals. She had her mother's gift with horses and her father's patience, a combination that served her well. She was already talking about breeding and training horses professionally, and Owen was helping her plan how to make that dream a reality. James, at 11, had discovered a love of photography, a new technology that fascinated him. Owen bought him a camera for his birthday, a significant expense, but worth it to see the joy on his son's face. James spent hours taking pictures of the ranch, the family, the landscape, creating a visual record of their lives that Owen knew would be precious someday. In 1900, Thomas came home for the summer break, full of ideas and enthusiasm about modern ranching techniques he had learned. Owen listened carefully, sometimes amused by his son's youthful certainty, but always impressed by his intelligence and drive. They implemented some of Thomas's suggestions, improving irrigation systems and trying new breeding practices, and the results were promising. That fall, as Thomas prepared to return to university, he pulled Owen aside for a private conversation. "Papa, I want you to know that I am coming back when I finish school. This ranch, this land, this family, this is where I belong. I am not learning all this to go somewhere else. I am learning it to help make this place even better." Owen felt pride swell in his chest so strongly it was almost painful. "I know, son, I never doubted it. Did you ever want me to experience more, to see the world the way you did before you settled here?" "No," Owen said firmly. "I never wanted that for you. The wandering I did, that was not adventure, Thomas. That was pain and loneliness and running from things I could not face. What I want for you is what I found with your mother: purpose, belonging, love. You have got all that right here." Thomas hugged him then, a rare display of emotion from the young man who was usually so reserved, and Owen held his son tight, thinking about how far he had come from that lost, angry young man who had ridden into Rawlins with nothing but a horse and a gun. By 1902, the ranch was thriving again, better than ever. Emma had expanded her horse breeding operation, and Watson horses were now in demand across 3 states. Owen had taken over more of the cattle operation, using the techniques Thomas had brought home and adding his own experience and intuition. Together, they had built something that would last for generations. Rose, at 16, had caught the eye of a young ranch hand named Peter Daniels, a good man from a decent family who worked hard and treated Rose with respect. Owen watched their courtship with mixed feelings, wanting his daughter to be happy but not ready to let her go. Emma laughed at his protectiveness, reminding him that Rose was strong and smart and perfectly capable of making her own choices. "You sound like my father," she teased one night as Owen grumbled about finding Rose and Peter sitting together on the porch swing. "He gave you such a hard time when we started courting." "Your father never gave me a hard time. He was already gone when I arrived." "Yes, but if he had been alive, he would have. A man with your reputation, sweeping in and stealing his daughter's heart. He would have been suspicious." Owen pulled her close, nuzzling her neck. "I did not steal your heart, you gave it to me freely." "True," Emma admitted. "Just like Rose is giving hers to Peter. He is a good man, Owen, you know he is. I know, I just wish she was not growing up so fast. That is what children do. They grow up and build their own lives. We did our job well, Owen. All 3 of them are turning into wonderful people." James, at 14, was still the dreamer of the family, but his photography had become quite skilled. He had started documenting the ranch in a systematic way, taking pictures of the buildings, the animals, the family, creating a comprehensive record of their lives. Owen sometimes looked at James's photographs and was struck by how much they revealed, not just the surface of things but the heart of them. One afternoon, James showed Owen a series of photographs he had taken of Owen and Emma over the past year, candid shots that captured them working together, laughing together, simply existing in each other's orbit. In every single picture, even when they were not touching, there was an obvious connection between them, a kind of gravity that pulled them together. "You can see it, can you not?" James said quietly. "How much you love each other, it is in every picture." Owen looked at the photographs, at the life he and Emma had built captured in silver and paper, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Yes, son, I can see it." In 1903, Thomas graduated from university and came home for good, bringing with him a young woman named Catherine whom he had met at school. She was smart and pretty and came from a ranching family herself, and Owen and Emma both liked her immediately. Thomas and Catherine were married that fall in the same church where Owen and Emma had exchanged vows 21 years earlier, and the cycle continued. They built a house for the young couple on the eastern edge of the Watson property, close enough to be part of the operation but far enough to give them privacy. Owen helped Thomas build it himself, the two of them working side by side, and Owen found himself thinking about his own father, wishing the old man could have seen what Owen had made of his life. By 1905, Owen was 50 years old, his hair going gray at the temples and lines etched deep around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was healthy and strong, still able to put in a full day's work alongside his sons. Emma was 46, still beautiful to Owen, with a few silver threads in her auburn hair and a grace that came from years of confidence and accomplishment. They had 4 grandchildren now, Thomas and Catherine's son William and daughter Mary, and they were expecting a 3rd child in the spring. Rose had married Peter Daniels in 1904, and they were expecting their first child that winter. James, at 19, was still unmarried, focused on his art and his photography, but Owen knew his youngest son would find his way in his own time. One evening in late summer, Owen and Emma were sitting on the porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sun set and talking about the day. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that only came from decades of knowing someone completely. "Do you ever think about that first day you rode up here?" Emma asked. 23 years ago this fall." "I think about it all the time," Owen said. "I think about how close I came to just riding past, to keeping on drifting like I had been doing. If I had been an hour earlier or an hour later, if the bartender had not mentioned your ranch, if you had not needed help right at that moment, everything would have been different." "Do you believe in fate?" Owen considered the question. "I think I believe in choices. I chose to come here. I chose to stay. I chose you every single day for 23 years, and you chose me back. That is not fate. That is commitment." Emma turned to look at him, her green eyes still as captivating as they had been that first day. "What if I asked you again?" "The question I asked that night after Jack Morrison. What changed, Owen? What really changed?" Owen took her hand, feeling the calluses that matched his own, the wedding ring that had never left her finger in 21 years of marriage. "You did," he said, the same answer he had given her then, but with 2 decades of proof behind it now. "You showed me that I could be more than a drifter and a gunfighter. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something that would last. You changed me from a man running away from his past into a man running toward his future. You did that, Emma, all of it." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I just gave you a chance. You did the rest. You chose to stay, chose to fight for us, chose to become the man you are now. I am proud of you, Owen Shepherd, prouder than I can say. And I am grateful. Every single day I am grateful that you saw something in me worth saving." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and Owen felt the same spark he had felt that first night in the barn, the same connection that had only grown stronger over the years. As the stars came out and the night sounds of the ranch surrounded them, Owen thought about the long road that had brought him here. The years of wandering and loneliness, the violence and emptiness, all of it had led him to this moment, this place, this woman. And he would not change a single thing, because every step had been necessary to bring him home. The years continued their steady march. By 1910, Owen was 55 years old, officially retired from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, though he still helped out when needed. Thomas had taken over completely, running the operation with Catherine's assistance, and they were doing an excellent job. The ranch had continued to grow and prosper, now one of the largest and most respected in the state. Rose and Peter had 3 children now, 2 boys and a girl, and they ran their own horse breeding operation on land they had purchased adjacent to the Watson Ranch. Rose had inherited her mother's gift and had built a thriving business. She and Emma often worked together, combining their expertise to produce some of the finest horses in the West. James had surprised everyone by becoming quite successful with his photography, traveling throughout Wyoming and the surrounding states, documenting the changing landscape and the people who inhabited it. He had published a book of photographs that had received critical acclaim, and he used the Watson Ranch as his home base between his travels. At 24, he was still unmarried, but Owen suspected that would change soon. He had seen the way James looked at the new schoolteacher in town, a pretty young woman named Helen who seemed equally interested in him. Emma was 61 now, her hair more silver than auburn, but still active and engaged with the ranch and the family. She and Owen had achieved something rare. They had grown old together, their love maturing and deepening with each passing year. They moved a bit slower now, their joints aching on cold mornings, but they were healthy and happy and surrounded by the family they had created. One warm afternoon in June, the whole family gathered at the main house for a celebration. It was Emma's birthday, and everyone had come home. Thomas and Catherine with their 5 children, Rose and Peter with their 3, and James with Helen, who had indeed become his wife the previous spring. The house rang with laughter and children's voices, and Owen stood back and watched it all with a sense of wonder. 30 years ago, he had been alone in the world, a drifter with no connections and no future. Now he was surrounded by children and grandchildren, all of them healthy and happy, all of them part of the legacy he and Emma had built together. After dinner, when the younger children were playing in the yard and the adults were sitting on the porch drinking coffee and talking, Emma pulled Owen aside. "Come with me," she said, taking his hand. "I want to show you something." She led him to the barn, to the same hayloft where they had spent that night before his confrontation with Jack Morrison, where they had made promises to each other in the darkness. It was still used for storage, but Emma had cleared a space and set up 2 chairs where they could sit and look out the loft door at the ranch spread out before them. "I come here sometimes," Emma said as they sat down, "when I want to think or remember." "This is where it all really started for us, Owen. This is where you chose to stay. Best decision I ever made," Owen said, putting his arm around her. "You have any regrets? Anything you wish you had done differently?" Owen thought about all the years, all the choices, all the roads not taken. "No," he said finally, "not a single one. My life did not really start until I met you, Emma. Everything before that was just preparation, getting me ready to be the man you deserved. You give me too much credit. I do not give you nearly enough." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You saved my life in every way that matters. You gave me purpose and family and love. You turned a rootless drifter into a man with something worth living for. How could I ever regret that?" Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Below them, they could hear the sounds of their family, multiple generations all gathered together, all connected by the love that Owen and Emma had built. "I worry sometimes," Emma said quietly, "about what will happen when we are gone. Will the children fight over the ranch? Will they split it up and sell it? Will everything we built just disappear?" "No," Owen said with certainty. "Look at them, Emma, really look." Thomas and Rose working together, James documenting everything so it will never be forgotten. They understand what we built here, not just a ranch, but a family, a legacy, a place where people belong. They will keep it going long after we are dust. I hope you are right. I am. I know our children. We raised them right. As the stars began to appear one by one, Owen and Emma made their way back to the house, where their family was waiting. They spent the rest of the evening telling stories and laughing, and Owen found himself telling tales from his wandering days that he had not thought about in years. But now, with the perspective of time and the security of love, even the hard years seemed like they had purpose, like they had been leading him somewhere all along. Late that night, after everyone else had gone to bed or headed back to their own homes, Owen and Emma lay together in the bedroom they had shared for 3 decades. The window was open, letting in the cool night breeze and the sounds of the ranch settling down for sleep. "Owen," Emma said in the darkness, "can I ask you one more time? The question I have asked you twice before, of course. What changed? What made you give up your wandering ways?" Owen smiled, though she could not see it. He knew she knew the answer, had always known the answer, but she wanted to hear it again. Needed to hear it, maybe, in this moment when they were both aware of their own mortality, of the finite nature of their time together. "You did," he said, pulling her close. "You changed everything. You took a lost man and gave him a home. You took a fighter and gave him peace. You took someone who thought he was not capable of love and showed him he was wrong. Everything good in my life, everything worth having, came from you. So yes, Emma Watson Shepherd, you changed me. You changed everything, and I would not have it any other way." Emma was crying. He could feel the wetness of her tears on his chest, but he knew they were happy tears. "I love you," she whispered. "I have loved you from the moment you stood in my yard with your hat in your hands, looking for work and trying not to look like you needed it desperately. I love you too. Always have, always will." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the way they had done thousands of times before, and Owen's last thought before sleep claimed him was that he was the luckiest man who had ever lived. The years rolled on, as they always do. By 1915, Owen was 60 years old, and the world was changing in ways he could barely comprehend. There was talk of war in Europe, and automobiles were beginning to replace horses in the towns, though the ranch still relied on horsepower for most of its work. The frontier that Owen had known in his youth was gone, replaced by something more settled and civilized, though Wyoming still maintained its wild character. Thomas was 44 now, firmly established as the head of the Watson Ranch, and his eldest son William was 23 and already taking on significant responsibilities. The continuity pleased Owen, knowing that the work he and Emma had started would continue for generations to come. Rose was 39, still working with horses, though she left more of the physical labor to her sons now. She and Emma remained close, often spending hours together discussing breeding programs and training techniques, their shared passion creating a bond that went beyond mother and daughter. James was 30, happily married to Helen, and they had just had their first child, a daughter they named Emma after her grandmother. James had given up his traveling to focus on his family and his photography studio in Rawlins, but he still came out to the ranch several times a week, documenting the ongoing story of the Watson family. Emma was 66, her hair completely silver now, but her green eyes still bright and sharp. She had slowed down considerably, arthritis making some tasks difficult, but her mind was as keen as ever. She still managed the books for the ranch, still advised Thomas on major decisions, still made time for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Owen's own health had begun to decline. Nothing serious, but the accumulation of years and hard work taking their toll. His knees ached, his back was stiff in the mornings, and he tired more easily than he used to. But he was content, surrounded by family and secure in the knowledge that his life had mattered. On a warm evening in September 1915, The family gathered again for a special celebration. It was 50 years since Emma had taken over the ranch after her father's death, and 33 years since Owen had first ridden up looking for work. Thomas had organized the whole thing, inviting friends and neighbors from across the county, and the celebration was held in the yard of the main house, where 3 generations of Watsons and Shepherds mingled and told stories. The governor sent a letter of congratulations, acknowledging the Watson Ranch as one of the most successful and enduring operations in the state. The mayor of Rawlins gave a speech praising Emma and Owen for their contributions to the community. And then Thomas stood up to say a few words, and Owen felt his throat tighten with emotion. "My parents taught me everything I know," Thomas said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "They taught me about hard work and honesty, about standing by your commitments and taking care of those who depend on you. But more than that, they taught me about love. Real, lasting, deep love that weathers every storm and only grows stronger with time." He turned to look at Owen and Emma, who were sitting together in chairs of honor. "My father came here with nothing but a horse and a gun and a whole lot of pain he was running from. My mother saw past all that to the man he could become. And together, they built something that will last long after any of us are gone. Not just this ranch, but a family, a legacy, an example of what 2 people can accomplish when they commit to each other completely." There was not a dry eye in the crowd, and Owen felt Emma's hand grip his tightly. He looked at her and saw his whole life reflected in her eyes. The struggles and triumphs, the children and grandchildren, the 33 years of waking up beside her and falling asleep in her arms. It had all been worth it, every moment, every choice, every day. After the speeches and the food and the celebration, after the guests had departed, and the family had dispersed to their various homes, Owen and Emma sat once again on their porch, watching the stars come out. It was their favorite time, had been for decades, this quiet moment when the world settled down and it was just the 2 of them. 60 years old, Owen said wonderingly. "How did that happen? I still feel like that 26-year-old kid who rode up here with no idea what he was looking for." "You found it, though," Emma said, "or maybe it found you, maybe we found each other." Owen stood up, his knees creaking, and held out his hand. "Dance with me. There is no music. We do not need music." Emma took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, and they swayed together on the porch in the starlight. No music but the night sounds of the ranch and the beating of their hearts. They moved slowly, carefully, their bodies knowing each other so well that words were unnecessary. "Thank you," Owen whispered into her hair. "For what? For everything. For seeing something in me worth saving. For giving me a chance when I did not deserve one. For loving me even when I was hard to love. For building this life with me. For everything, Emma, just thank you." "You do not need to thank me," she said. "Loving you was the easiest thing I ever did." They danced until Emma grew tired, and then they went inside to bed, where they lay together in the darkness and talked about their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, about the ranch and the future, about all the things they still wanted to do and see together. "We have had a good life, have we not?" Emma asked. "The best," Owen agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. No regrets, not a single one." Emma fell asleep first, her breathing evening out and her body relaxing against his. Owen stayed awake a bit longer, looking at her face in the moonlight that streamed through the window, memorizing every line and wrinkle, every familiar feature. He had spent more than half his life with this woman, and it still was not enough. He wanted more years, more days, more moments like this. But whatever time they had left, he would treasure it, because Emma had given him everything, a home, a family, a purpose, a life worth living. She had taken a broken, wandering man and made him whole. She had changed him in every way that mattered. "You did," he whispered, so quietly she could not hear. "You changed everything." And with that thought, Owen Shepherd closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, content and at peace, knowing that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The final years of Owen and Emma's life together were marked by increasing contentment and decreasing energy. By 1920, Owen was 65 and Emma was 71, both of them largely retired from active work on the ranch. They spent their days on the porch, watching the younger generations go about their business, occasionally offering advice when asked, but mostly just enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. Thomas was now 50, completely gray but still strong and capable, running the ranch with his son William, who at 28 had proven himself more than worthy of the responsibility. The ranch had continued to grow and modernize, adding new technology while maintaining the traditional values that Owen and Emma had instilled. Rose had just become a grandmother herself at 44, her eldest son having married and started a family of his own. She still worked with horses, but at a much gentler pace, focusing on teaching her grandchildren the skills she had learned from Emma. James was 35, his photography business thriving, and he had 2 children now, both showing signs of artistic talent. He had recently completed a comprehensive photographic history of the Watson Ranch, from old photographs of Emma's father to current pictures of the latest generation of children. It was a beautiful testament to the family's legacy, and Owen looked through it often, amazed at how much they had accomplished. Owen's health had continued to decline slowly but steadily. His heart was weak, the doctor said, worn out from 65 years of hard living and hard work. He had good days and bad days, days when he felt almost like his younger self and days when getting out of bed was an accomplishment. Emma's arthritis had gotten worse, but her mind remained sharp, and she still managed to stay involved in everything that mattered. She worried about Owen constantly, watching him with the same careful attention she had given her horses, alert for any sign of distress. On a crisp October morning in 1921, Owen woke feeling unusually tired. His chest ached in a way that was becoming familiar, and his breathing seemed more labored than usual. But it was a beautiful day, and Emma had promised to sit with him on the porch, so he got dressed and made his way downstairs slowly. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, watching the ranch come alive with morning activity. Thomas rode by and waved, leading a group of hands out to check on the cattle. Rose arrived with 2 of her grandchildren, who immediately ran off to look at the horses. James stopped by with his camera, taking pictures of his parents in the morning light, though Owen thought he looked worried. "Are you feeling all right, Papa?" James asked, and Owen waved away his concern. "Just tired, son. I am 66 years old. I am allowed to be tired." But as the day wore on, Owen felt worse rather than better. His chest pain increased, and a strange numbness began spreading down his left arm. He tried to hide it from Emma, not wanting to worry her, but she knew him too well. "Owen," she said, her voice sharp with fear. "Owen, something is wrong." "I am fine," he said, but even he could hear how weak his voice sounded. Emma called for James, who ran to get Thomas, and within minutes Owen was surrounded by his family, all of them talking at once. Someone sent for the doctor, but Owen knew it was too late for doctors. He had seen enough death in his life to recognize it when it came for him. "Help me inside," he said quietly, and Thomas and William carefully lifted him and carried him to the bedroom he had shared with Emma for almost 40 years. They laid him on the bed, and Emma climbed in beside him, holding his hand and trying not to cry. The children and grandchildren gathered around, and Owen looked at each of their faces, memorizing them, trying to find words for everything he wanted to say. "I am proud of all of you," he managed. "You have all built good lives, raised good families. You are carrying on what Emma and I started, and that means everything to me." "Do not talk like that, Papa," Rose said, tears streaming down her face. "You are going to be fine. The doctor is coming." "The doctor cannot fix this, sweetheart." Owen smiled at his daughter, remembering the wild little girl she had been, so fearless and full of life. "But that is all right. I have had more than I ever deserved, more than I ever dreamed. I have been lucky, so very lucky." He turned to Thomas. "Take care of the ranch, son. Take care of your mother. And remember that it is not just about the land or the cattle. It is about family, about building something that lasts." "I will, Papa, I promise." James was quietly weeping, and Owen wished he had the strength to comfort him. "Keep taking pictures, James. Keep telling our story. Make sure the world knows what we built here." "I will, Papa." Then Owen turned to Emma, who was holding his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. He looked into those green eyes that had captivated him 40 years ago, that had seen him at his worst and his best, and had loved him through it all. "Emma," he whispered. "My Emma. Do not leave me," she begged. "Please, Owen, I am not ready. We knew this day would come eventually." He reached up with his free hand and touched her face, feeling the soft skin and the tears on her cheeks. "I am only sorry I could not give you more time. You gave me everything." Emma leaned down and kissed him, gentle and sweet. "You gave me a life worth living, children and grandchildren I am proud of, a partnership that was everything I ever wanted. You did not just give me time, Owen. You gave me a reason to treasure every moment. You did the same for me." Owen's voice was fading, and he could feel himself slipping away, but he held on, needing to say this last thing. "Do you remember what you asked me all those times? What changed? What made me give up my wandering ways?" "I remember. The answer is still the same. You did. You changed everything. You took a lost, broken man and made him whole. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to live. You saved my life in every way that matters." He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "I love you, Emma Watson Shepherd. I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you beyond death, beyond whatever comes next. You are my heart, my home, my everything." "I love you too," Emma sobbed. "I love you so much." Owen looked at his family gathered around the bed, at the life he had built, at the woman he had loved with everything he had. It was enough, more than enough. He had started with nothing and ended with everything. It was all worth it, he whispered. Every moment, every choice. It was all worth it. And then Owen Shepherd closed his eyes for the last time, surrounded by the family he had helped create, held in the arms of the woman who had changed his life. He died the way he had lived for the past 40 years, at peace, at home, and deeply loved. Emma stayed with his body for hours, refusing to leave, holding him and talking to him as if he could still hear. She told him about their life together, about all the moments big and small that had made up their marriage. She thanked him for every day, every kindness, every moment of love he had given her. Finally, as night fell, Thomas gently convinced her to let them prepare Owen's body for burial. They would lay him to rest in the family cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, where Emma's father was buried, and where she herself would join him someday. The funeral was 3 days later, attended by hundreds of people from across the state. Owen had become a respected figure in the community, known for his fairness and his work ethic, and his devotion to his family. The preacher spoke about a man who had found his way home after years of wandering, about a love story that had spanned 4 decades, about a life well lived. Emma stood dry-eyed through most of it, holding herself together through sheer force of will. But when they lowered Owen's casket into the ground and began covering it with earth, she finally broke down, supported by her children as she said her final goodbye to the man who had been her partner, her friend, her love for more than half her life. After the funeral, Emma spent long hours at Owen's grave, talking to him, telling him about the day's events, asking him for advice the way she had done for 40 years. Some people thought she was losing her mind, but her children knew better. She was processing her grief, honoring their partnership, maintaining the connection that death could not break. Emma lived for 5 more years, staying active and engaged with the ranch and the family, despite the grief that never fully left her. She helped Thomas make decisions about the operation, taught her great-grandchildren about horses, and spent time with James helping him complete the comprehensive history of the ranch that would become the definitive record of the family's legacy. She spoke often of Owen, always with love and pride, telling stories about their early years together to anyone who would listen. She wanted everyone to know about the wandering cowboy who had found his home, about the love that had transformed them both, about the life they had built together from nothing. On a warm spring day in 1926, Emma Watson Shepherd died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 77. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Owen, a smile on her face and his photograph clutched in her hand. They buried her next to Owen on the hill overlooking the ranch, and as the family gathered to say goodbye, Thomas spoke about his parents and the legacy they had left behind. "My father was a wanderer who found his home," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother was a woman who saw the best in everyone and brought it out through her love. Together, they built something that will last for generations. Not just this ranch, but a family united by love and commitment and the values they lived every day." He paused, looking out at the ranch spread below them, at the buildings and the cattle and the horses, at everything his parents had created together. "My mother asked my father once, many times actually, what changed, what made him give up his wandering ways and stay. And every time he gave the same answer, 'You did.' She changed him, gave him a reason to stop running, a place to call home." Thomas smiled through his tears. "But the truth is, they changed each other. My father gave my mother a partner and a love that sustained her through every challenge. They made each other better, stronger, more complete. That is what we have to honor now, not just their memory but their example. The way they loved each other, the way they built this family, the values they instilled in us. That is the real legacy they left behind." As the years passed, the Watson Ranch continued to thrive under the management of Thomas, and then William, and then William's children. The family grew and changed, spreading out across Wyoming and beyond, but they always stayed connected to the ranch, to the place where Owen and Emma had built their life together. James's photographic history became a treasured family heirloom, passed down through the generations, a visual record of everything Owen and Emma had created. The story of the wandering cowboy and the strong woman who loved him became part of family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, inspiring new generations to value commitment and love and building things that last. In the end, Owen Shepherd had given up his wandering ways for Emma Watson, and in doing so he had found everything he had been looking for without knowing it. A home, a family, a purpose, a love that transcended death. She had asked him what changed, and he had answered truthfully every time, "You did." And that simple truth became the foundation for a legacy that lasted far beyond their lifetimes, a testament to the transformative power of love and the choice to stop running and start building. Owen and Emma's story was not about fate or destiny or magic. It was about two people choosing each other every day for 40 years and building something beautiful from that choice. That was their gift to their children and their children's children. The knowledge that love is a choice, that home is something you create, and that the most important thing you can do in life is find someone who changes you for the better and hold on to them with everything you have. Owen Shepherd had spent 8 years wandering the West, lost and alone, before he rode up to the Watson Ranch looking for work. And Emma Watson had spent years running a ranch alone, carrying burdens too heavy for one person, before a dusty cowboy with sad eyes asked her for a job. They found each other at exactly the right moment, when they both needed someone to share the load and the love. And they built a life together that stood as a monument to what was possible when two people truly committed to each other. That was the real story, the one that mattered, the one that their descendants would carry forward long after the buildings crumbled, and the land changed hands, and the West they had known disappeared into history. The story of how a wandering cowboy gave up his restless ways for a strong woman, and how that choice changed everything.